So new Ophydian Destroyers, new Flayed ones and new Crypteks, plus a few more details about the command protocols and a look at the Silent King's stat line. It's not a bad weekend for Necron news. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where we were talking about yesterday's previews on the Necron Codex and the many new models and rules that they also teased alongside it. In the video we'll go over all the Necron content from the show and talk over a few of the leaked rules that they've revealed to us. As a bit of an overview, we've seen 3 new kits here today. For me the standout models are the new Ophydian Destroyers, a completely new breed of Necron that do bear a lot of similarities to the old Necron Metal Wraith kit, the one that preceded the Crypteks one. There's also 2 new Cryptek character variants, a chronomancer and a psychomancer, and quite nicely a new Necron Flayed one kit to replace the one made out of the questionable resin finecast. In terms of details from the Codex, we've got a fair bit more detail as to how the Necron protocols are going to work, the Zarrican Dynasty's stat line officially unveiled, the full datasheet from the Ophydian Destroyers, a Silent King stat line, and a few other special rules. Let's start out with these swanky new Ophydian Destroyers then. I must say I really quite like the models. They do bear striking resemblance to the old Metal Wraiths, with the whip coil-like body, the 2 long questing tendrils, but they've also gained some nice power blades on top of that, and they're actually armed quite similarly to the new Ophydian Destroyers. I think these guys are beautifully sinister, and fit in really well with the rest of the Necron releases that have come out recently. I think it does seem quite likely that we're not going to be seeing smaller sized Locust Destroyers from this though, which was something that I was wondering whether might join the Necron range at some stage, and I guess it's still not technically impossible, but I'd find it just a little bit unlikely if they released 3 different types of destroyers all at once, particularly on top of all the massive generous amounts of kits that Necrons have got recently. We do have what looks to be a full datasheet for this, though there are a couple of things that make me question whether or not it's entirely the final finished draft of this. Namely the fact that the kit does appear to come with the plasmacite that you can see on the top right corner, who looks like he's a similar sort of critter to the one that comes with the Ophydian Destroyers. There's no mention of him whatsoever with this kit, which would be a bit weird as he does appear to come with it. They also seem to lack the fly keyword as well, and just looking at the models I would say that they look like they should have the fly keyword. I know the Necron Wraiths don't have that, but they have their Wraith form instead. It just does look like they're hovering as opposed to like walking around weirdly on those coils. So a couple of questionable bits here, but we still have quite a lot of details as to how the unit's going to work. First of all, they can be included in units of 3 to 6, so you could have quite a big threatening blob of these guys. They're power level 5, which would roughly equate to the models being something like 35 points each, and in general they seem to be a bit more of a lightly armoured but faster and more mobile version of the Ophydian Destroyers. They have movement 10, and they have the innate ability to deep strike via their Tunneling Horrors special rule. Apparently they're allowed to hide in pocket dimensions and pop out to kill the enemies. Where the Ophydian Destroyers have Strength and Toughness 5, these guys are only Strength and Toughness 4, and only have a 4+ save rather than a 3+1. They do have 3 wounds and 3 attacks very similar to them. For every 3 models in the squad, one of them has Hyperphase Reap Blades, the one that's Strength +2, AP -4 and Damage 3, so pretty decent against pretty much everything. And the other 2 have Hyperphase Threshers, the ones that are AP -3 and flat damage 2, and you can add 1 additional attack each time they fight with that weapon. Even on top of this, they're also armed with Ophidian Claws, which are just strength user weapons at AP -1, but you get 2 free attacks with that weapon each time they fight. It means that the Thresher ones are going to have 6 attacks each, and the Reapblade one's going to have 5, so they're going to absolutely chew through virtually any enemy infantry. Being only strength 4 is a bit of a weakness if you're trying to fight some Space Marines with those Threshers. It does mean that if the Plasmacite works fairly similar to how it works in the Ophydian Destroyers, then it could be really quite a relevant strength boost, getting them to strength 5. In terms of special rules, they have Living Metal, Reanimation Protocols and Command Protocols. Living Metal is quite a nice include. It seems like the trend seems to be for most Necron units that have multi-wounds to be getting this. Command Protocols will come on to a bit later. They have a Whip Coil Bodies special rule, which means that enemies are -1 to hit them in melee. And they have the Standard Destroyer Hardwired for Destruction special rule, which means they re-roll hit rolls of 1. Overall, they feel like quite a solid unit to me. I think the innate Deep Strike ability is really quite helpful, and they kind of feel a bit like the equivalent of Necron Death Company, a scary melee unit that pops up from nowhere, causes carnage, but then isn't that hard to take down. They're going to work absolutely amazingly with Novok with the new rules. That gives them +1 to charges, which is great for them emerging from Deep Strike, and also the extra AP -1 on the charge will do great with those Ophidian Claws, as getting to AP -2 is a significant upgrade. Hopefully I'll do a bit more of an in-depth discussion video on these guys later in the week. Very happy with them though, cool rules and very cool models. Next up we have 2 new Crypteks, a chronomancer and a psychomancer. The chronomancer has a nice planet-like staff I've already seen memes about him being the Rubik's Cube champion of the galaxy. He's the Cryptek that deals with time-related matters, and also a psychomancer, who supposedly uses technology to harness the power of the Nightbringer to instill a bit of that lovely dread fear in all the lesser races. Now we've seen that the standard Cryptek has been rebranded as a Technomancer. That actually gives us 4 different variants. We've got a Chronomancer, Psychomancer, Technomancer and Plasmancer, which is looking like a very decent amount of HQ choice. We've got a couple of special rules for them, including this Chronometron ability, which is changed to how it was previous. It activates in your command phase, and you have to select one dynasty unit within 9 inches of them. Until the start of your next command phase, that unit gets a 5+ invul. Personally, I feel like this might be actually slightly weaker than the previous version, which was a 3-inch aura ability for Necron infantry units to get the 5-up invul save. Even though the aura ability was really small, it did mean that you could affect multiple big units of infantry with it, and also it activated whenever your Cryptek was on the board, rather than having to wait for the Necron turn 1, and if your opponent gets turn 1, you're not going to get that invul on the board. Now you can select any unit, it doesn't just have to be Necron infantry, so you could buff vehicles or other things. The range is a little bit bigger, so you've got a bit more flexibility as to where to deploy it, and it has also gained the rule allowing you to reroll charge rolls made for the unit that turn. To me this seems pretty much destined to be used on things like Ophydian Destroyers, who both very much like the additional survivability that the 5+ invul will bring, and also rerolling charges. So a bit of a shift in difference for that really, but still seems quite powerful. I wouldn't be surprised if he also has some additional abilities. The Psychomancer looks pretty cool as well. I really like that digital skull creation that he's creating with those tendrils. I've got to admit I really quite like this model as well. Though I have to admit, if you're an Imperial citizen and you're disturbed by skulls, then you're probably not going to last very long. Skulls seem to be very much the going motif for everything in the Imperium. In any case, he's got a leadership debuff ability. Leadership debuffing isn't the most powerful most of the time, but this one is at least a little bit more interesting. You both subtract 1 from morale, and also subtract 1 from combat attrition tests. It's one of the first mechanics that we've seen interacting with that rule. I think this guy's really going to have either quite a cheap points cost or some other significant abilities, as it's only going to come up quite niche. Some armies just don't care about morale at all. Next up we have new Flayed ones, who appear to come in a kit of 5 from this image. Very nice to see them being updated, as they have a pretty nasty resin kit, with Finecast interacting particularly badly with their long blades and things. Now they're imagined in creepy plastic, sinister metal murder machines draped in human skin. The guy on the bottom left with the hand hanging off him, I think that's particularly grim. Again, they do seem to have gained some extra special rules. Their blades are now AP-1 apparently, so if they retain the absolute bucket load of attacks they normally have, then they're going to hit quite hard. Far more relevant against things like Space Marines that we're seeing a lot now. They also have a Flesh Hunger special rule, which means they get additional hits on 6s if they're attacking a non-vehicle unit. Theoretically, a full unit of 10 putting out 30 attacks will be getting around 25 hits on the charge, or the AP-1 strength 4. There's very little that's not going to put a dent in. Again, these guys will be one of the best users of the Novok dynasty. They've got lots of low AP attacks, and they're also deep strikers, so we'll definitely want the +1 to charge. An 8-inch charge with AP-2 attacks will be absolutely brutal for these. Novok really could be a dynasty to watch, what with the extraordinary amount of Necron close combat releases that we've seen recently. Moving on to the Necron Codex itself. To be honest, we've only got a few scanty details of this, but we do know that it's 120 pages. There's a new background and lore content, as you'd expect. The primary focus of the book being around the rise of the Zarican dynasty, and the return of the Silent King to the galaxy at large. The Twitch stream showed off this pretty excellent new piece of artwork. Supposedly the Silent King is somewhere in that nexus of glowing white light there, and you can see his Triarch Praetorians shepherding the Necron warriors down below. We know it's out in October, though still no official release date yet as far as I can tell. One of the most hotly anticipated rules from the new Codex are the new Necron command protocols, and they do seem quite good. We knew that they were going to be army-wide special buffs of some sort. It seems there's going to be 6 of them available, and you can see one of them, the Protocol of the Conquering Tyrant, on the right. Each protocol essentially has 2 buffs that you can pick one of, and it's got a bit of a weird mechanic where basically at the start of the game you have to line up your 6 protocols, pick 5 of them, and in secret note down which order they're going to happen in. You get 1 per turn. I think that this is quite an interesting mechanic. Basically it means that you're going to have to formulate some sort of battle plan as you go forward for the Necron army, and I think it'll reward you of having some sort of anticipation for what your army is likely to be doing turn on turn. I'm not going to lie, it does sound like a little bit of annoying admin to be done at the start of a game. I suspect that a lot of players will just literally revert to a pretty set protocol order that they're used to using in their army, maybe tailored a bit as to whether or not they have a more ranged or melee Necron force. Basically, when you get to each turn, You will have the protocol that you've established at the start of the game, and you get to choose either Directive 1 or Directive 2 from that protocol. Each of these will be an army-wide special rule, maybe with some restrictions as to which units can use it, and it will make them stronger in some way. For example, this protocol of the Conquering Tyrant that they have shown, basically you get to either choose between an extension to aura buffs, so all auras and some other special rules gain 3-inch range, and the second option, which is a unit being able to fall back and shoot in the same turn. Basically, if you had this one listed for second turn, you could see at the start of that turn whether or not a lot of your units are in combat. Maybe think about fall back and shoot if that happens, but otherwise just take the aura buffs. I think the strength of these things is going to depend on the other protocols themselves. This one seems okay, but perhaps not necessarily something to plan the whole game around. It's worth noting that each of the named dynasties also gets one protocol they're especially good at, and when they get to that protocol, they just get both of those buffs rather than just one. So if you're playing any given dynasty, then that protocol might be one that you might want to have racked up early. We'll have to see the full list and see which ones are best. I wouldn't be surprised if there's one or two that really jump out as ones that you want to have early in the game, with the rest being a bit more of a wash. It sounds like these abilities might be a little bit harder to build an entire army around compared with some of the other full faction buffs that other races get, such as Space Marine combat doctrines for extra AP, just because the rule buffs that you're going to get are going to change each turn, so it's going to be hard to flavour an entire army around using those buffs. Still though, I think it's really quite an interesting mechanic, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it in full. Next up, we've got a few more rule reveals. We have already seen the Zarakan dynasty, but they have previewed it again. They ignore mortal wounds on the roll of a 5+, and also every time one of their unit makes an attack, they get to reroll one wound roll. This is going to be really good for anything with low numbers of powerful shots, things like Doomsday Arcs or Doomstalkers, where if you're rerolling a very powerful dice with that failed wound roll, then it could give you a fair bit of extra damage increase. They also get Protocol of the Undying Legions, which we haven't seen yet, and they'll get both buffs from that. Next we have something called Cryptek Arcana, which is apparently a upgrade that you can give to Crypteks, and it sounds like these aren't relics, as apparently you have to pay power or points for them if you want to upgrade them in this way. The Space Marines appear to have a slightly similar mechanic with their Master of Sanctity, so it sounds like some character upgrades are now going to cost points. This one is for that chronomancer, and it's called Contemporal Nanomines, which are basically time-related shenanigans to slow down enemies. In your shooting phase, a chronomancer can nominate one enemy unit within 18 inches, and until the start of their next turn, they halve an advance and charge rolls made for that unit. If you're against an enemy unit that can't move very fast, then you could potentially stop them making a charge. It's okay, but bear in mind that your chronomancer does have to get at least fairly close to the front lines to be able to deploy it. Obviously it'll depend on the points and if there's any other better ones out there, but messing with enemy units' movement and one that happens automatically, not needing a psychic test or anything, is usually pretty powerful. Finally, we've got a bit from Crusade, which is just one rule for Necron characters to turn into Destroyer cult characters, basically succumbing to the madness of the Destroyer curse, and just going on a nice quest to exterminate all life instead of doing their normal dynasty type things. You basically replace that character with a Destroyer cult character that's got the same amount of experience points as the character that came before it. You immediately generate battle honours based on this experience. Not really that much to go on for the Crusade content all by itself, but it'll be interesting to see what other fluffy options they get. Finally, we've just got a brief look at the Silent King stat line. Sadly not a full datasheet for this guy as I would have liked to see, but apparently the full datasheet is absolutely massive and has a very decent amount of special rules, both in terms of buffing nearby warriors, his own durability, and also supposedly quite impressive combat stats. Statline wise, he's a 16 wound model that does degrade as he takes damage. He's got movement 8 inches, weapon skill and ballistic skill 2+, strength 5, toughness 7, 16 wounds, 6 attacks, leadership 10 and a 3+ save. We don't know whether he has quantum shielding or anything else going on in terms of invul saves. He's also accompanied by these 2 triarchal Menhirs they're called, and they appear to be other models within the same unit, I think primarily just there to take shots, and they have toughness 7, 5 wounds and a 3+ save as well. Basically this means that he's going to be around about 27 wounds worth of toughness 7, and also the damage wasted that you might lose when you overkill the triarchal Menhirs. This guy's just not going to go away to anything but dedicated firepower. The Warhammer community team mentioned that he might be able to go toe-to-toe with Demon Primarchs, which will be pretty impressive if so. We really need to know his weapon profiles, what that katana can do, whether he has additional attacks from those Triarch members around him. Though they did mention that those Menhirs can attack as well. While they're around, they can attack with some sort of ranged energy weapon. In any case, he does look very cool. I'm glad he's decently durable. It would be a shame to have such an awesome model on the table and just have him be annoyingly easy to gun down. So lots of really cool Necron stuff there. Honestly, I think they've knocked it out of the park with this one. I was not expecting another 4 new Necron kits. I'm really looking forward to when we see the Codex details in full. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below as always. If there's anything I've missed, or there's any subtleties that you think might be really strong for the Necrons going forward, I'd like to hear about it. And I'll be covering the Space Marine content from the previews hopefully later today. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll certainly be covering the Necron updates as they come out, or just check back later for more videos. If you've been enjoying the videos on the channel, I'd just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page, which is how I can continue to make so many videos quite so regularly. The link's down in the video description below if interested. Channel patrons get to see a video early each week, there's regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and you also get entered into the Auspex Tactics prize giveaway each month with a chance to win some big kits. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then feel free to have a look down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.